The night was quiet, the soft glow of the television casting shadows across the living room. My wife sat at the other end of the couch, scrolling through her phone, her expression unreadable. I leaned back, staring at my own screen, trying to wind down after a long week. The silence was broken by my phone buzzing on the table. I glanced at the name on the screen, Albert. He was my business partner, someone I worked closely with to keep the company running smoothly. His calls usually meant work, but it was late for business talk. Albert, I said, picking up. Hey. His voice was lively. I'm throwing a party tomorrow. You and your wife need to be there. Just something fun, nothing crazy. A party? We hadn't been to one in years. Life had a way of getting in the way. Work, responsibilities, the usual grind. Sounds good, I said, already feeling a bit of anticipation. When I told my wife, her face lit up. I hadn't seen her that excited in a while. A party? Really? She asked, sitting up straighter. Yeah, Albert's hosting it. Tomorrow night. She didn't hesitate. She was already heading toward the bedroom, muttering something about needing to find the right outfit. My wife had always loved parties. Before we got married, she thrived in those settings, always the center of attention. But after we tied the knot, her priorities seemed to shift, or maybe life just caught up with her too. From the living room, I could hear her rummaging through the closet. I don't even know what to wear, she called out. Something classic, I suggested. Maybe old money vibes. She laughed, but then her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I noticed how quickly she silenced it, not even bothering to check the screen. This wasn't the first time I'd seen her do that. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it, but tonight it felt odd. Shaking it off, I turned my attention back to the TV. It was just a party, a chance to let loose, to reconnect. But something about the way she fussed over her outfit and the call she ignored lingered in the back of my mind. The next evening crept closer, but something still nagged at me about the way my wife had dismissed that call. I tried to push it aside, convincing myself it was nothing, but as I watched her finish her preparations, it was like an itch I couldn't scratch. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing out the fabric of her cream dress. It hugged her figure perfectly, and she looked stunning, like she always did. But the tension in my chest hadn't eased. I got up from the couch and walked toward her. Who keeps calling you like that? I asked, my tone more direct than I intended. You always hang up right away. Are you hiding something from me? She froze, her hands pausing mid-motion on the hem of her dress. Her face turned slightly, but she didn't meet my eyes. Do you have a lover? The words came out sharper than I expected, cutting through the air between us. She turned to me fully now, her face flush with color. What? No, I'm not cheating on you, she said quickly, her voice tinged with a mix of shock and frustration. It's my friend calling me. Sarah, we had a fight, and I don't want to talk to her right now. I crossed my arms, my brow furrowed. Show me, I said, trying to sound calm, but feeling anything but. She rolled her eyes, grabbing her phone from the dresser. Fine. Here. She swiped across the screen and held it out to me. Sure enough, the call log showed Sarah's name. I exhaled slowly, the weight of my suspicion now replaced by a heavy embarrassment. I'm sorry, I mumbled, handing the phone back. I shouldn't have assumed. It's fine, she said, though there was a slight edge to her voice. She turned back to the mirror, brushing off the moment like it was nothing. But I couldn't help feeling a lingering sting of guilt. After a moment, I walked to the other room to sort out my own outfit. My wardrobe was lined with sharp, tailored suits, each one carefully chosen for boardrooms and events where first impressions mattered. I ran my hand along the row of jackets, but none of them felt right for tonight. Fuck these suits, I muttered under my breath, stepping back. I wanted something different, something less rigid, less suffocating. After a bit of searching, I found what I was looking for, a loose, oversized suit in a soft charcoal color. It was a little unconventional for someone in my position, but I liked the way it felt. It was comfortable, relaxed. I knew many of my business partners would be at the party, but for once, I didn't care about their opinions. I wasn't dressing for them. When I glanced in the mirror, the suit hung differently than what I was used to. But it felt good, like a small rebellion against the expectations I carried every day. I straightened the collar and stepped back into the bedroom, where my wife was now adjusting her earrings. She glanced at me and smiled faintly. "That's different," she said. "It's a party," I replied, shrugging. "Might as well have a little fun." She laughed softly, and for a moment, the tension between us seemed to dissolve. Maybe tonight would be a chance to let things breathe, to reset whatever had been feeling off lately. Or maybe not. We sat at the dining table that evening, eating in comfortable silence. The faint clinking of silverware on plates was the only sound between us. I glanced at my wife, who seemed unusually absorbed in her thoughts. She had her phone resting just beside her plate, fingers moving quickly over the screen. I caught a glimpse of her typing something. Then, just as quickly, she locked the phone and slid it away the moment she noticed me looking. Something twisted in my gut, but I swallowed it down. I told myself I was imagining things, overthinking. She was probably texting Sarah again, or maybe her mom. It wasn't worth bringing up, I thought. Still, it lingered in the back of my mind. Lately, there had been little things. The way she tucked her phone away when I entered the room, the missed calls she refused to answer, the moments she seemed lost in thought. For the past month, I'd noticed these subtle shifts like small cracks in the surface of something solid. But I chose to ignore them. It wasn't that I didn't care, far from it. I just didn't have the energy to pick at every little detail. Work had been a constant source of stress, and I barely had the bandwidth to deal with everything on my plate. I convinced myself that whatever was going on with her, it wasn't a big deal. Sooner or later, I thought it would come out on its own. Besides, tonight wasn't the time for suspicion. This party tomorrow felt like a chance to hit the reset button for both of us. I leaned back in my chair, forcing a smile. "You're excited for tomorrow?" Her face lit up immediately, and any lingering doubt I had was momentarily erased by the genuine joy in her expression. "I really am," she said, her voice bright. "It's been so long since we've gone out like this. I feel like it's exactly what we need." I watched as she talked about the party, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She gestured animatedly, running through ideas about what it might be like. The people, the atmosphere, the music. It reminded me of the woman I had fallen for. Vibrant, alive. Someone who could light up any room she walked into. "Sounds like you've already planned the whole night in your head," I said, chuckling softly. "Maybe," she replied with a grin. I really need this." "We both do." Her words struck a chord. She wasn't wrong. Things between us had felt distant lately, though neither of us had said it aloud. Tomorrow was a chance to reconnect, to remember why we worked so well together in the first place. As I watched her talk, I pushed the nagging doubts out of my mind. She deserved this night. We both did. Whatever tension I had felt earlier was buried, at least for now. The party couldn't come soon enough. The night air hung heavy in the room, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful but oppressive. Lisa's breathing beside me was steady, rhythmic, each exhale a whisper of normalcy that only deepened the ache in my chest. I turned onto my side, staring at the faint glow of her phone on the nightstand. It was so close. Too close. The thought had been gnawing at me for weeks now, a splinter lodged deep beneath my skin. Lisa had always been an open book, or so I thought. Her laughter used to fill our evenings, her phone an afterthought during our moments together. Lately, though, her eyes lingered on it longer than they did on me, her smile flickering like a bad signal when I walked into the room. I hadn't meant to let it fester. But tonight, lying next to her, the silence felt suffocating. My chest tightened with the weight of what I hadn't dared to ask. I told myself I'd only check to quiet the doubts, to reclaim some semblance of peace. Sliding my hand over the sheets, I inched toward her nightstand. Every shift of my body felt deafening, the creak of the mattress a scream in the darkness. My fingers brushed the cool surface of her phone, and I held my breath. One chance. That was all I needed. I glanced at her sleeping form. She didn't stir, her lips slightly parted, hair spread out like ink on the pillow. My heart hammered as I tapped the screen, the glow painting my face in pale light. The keypad appeared, a familiar set of numbers etched into memory. 3553. It didn't work. My breath caught, the silence now roaring in my ears. I tried again, slower this time, but the screen flashed red with rejection. Lisa changed it. The realization hit me harder than I'd expected, sending a cold shiver down my spine. She'd never changed her password before. Not in all the years we'd been together. Why now? I stared at the screen, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. Could it be work? A surprise she didn't want me to ruin? Or was it something darker? My hand trembled as I set the phone back down, careful not to disturb her. The air felt heavier, the bed suddenly foreign beneath me. I tried to focus on her face, as if some answer might lie in the curve of her cheek or the flutter of her lashes. But the questions clawed at me relentlessly. When I finally closed my eyes, sleep wouldn't come. Instead, my mind filled with flashes of her guarded smile, the way she'd pull her phone closer when I walked into the room. It wasn't just paranoia, it couldn't be. Not anymore. When exhaustion finally claimed me, it dragged me into a world of chaos. I dreamt of Lisa laughing with someone I couldn't see, her silhouette retreating into shadows no matter how fast I ran. Her phone rang incessantly, the sound sharp and mocking, but I couldn't answer. Every time I reached for her, she dissolved, slipping through my fingers like smoke. I woke up screaming. The sound tore through the room, ripping me from the nightmare's grip. My chest heaved, sweat clinging to my skin. Lisa shot up beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "David, what's wrong?" she gasped, her hand on my arm. I couldn't answer. The words stuck somewhere between my lungs and throat. My breaths came shallow and erratic, the remnants of the dream still clawing at the edges of my mind. "Hey, it's okay," she said, her voice soft but trembling. She reached for the nightstand, her movements quick, frantic. A moment later, she pressed a small pill into my palm. "Take this, it'll help." I wanted to argue, to push her hand away, but the weight of her gaze pinned me down. She looked scared, genuinely scared, and for a moment, I hated myself for being the cause. I swallowed the pill dry, the bitterness settling on my tongue. She stayed beside me, her hand brushing my hair as my breathing steadied. The sedative worked fast, pulling me under like a tide I couldn't fight. As sleep took me, her voice was the last thing I heard. "You're okay," she whispered, but I wasn't sure if she meant me or herself. Morning came too soon, dragging me from the fog of restless sleep. Lisa's voice cut through the haze like a knife, high-pitched and insistent. "This is the day, David. We're hanging out today. Wake up." I groaned, rolling onto my side and burying my face into the pillow. The sedative still lingered, weighing my limbs with a dull heaviness. I didn't want to wake up. Not to this, not to her. "David," she called again, her tone a strange mix of excitement and irritation. "Come on, get up." Reluctantly, I peeled myself from the bed, blinking against the harsh sunlight pouring through the curtains. Lisa was already bustling around the room, her energy grating against the lethargy still clinging to me. I shuffled into the bathroom, Lisa trailing behind me with a bounce in her step. She leaned beside me at the sink, brushing her teeth with such vigor that her reflection in the mirror seemed to mock my sluggish movements. I didn't want to talk. Not to her. Not to anyone. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the rhythmic swish of toothbrushes. Her face was radiant, glowing in a way that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just her natural beauty. It was the cheerfulness, the ease, the way she seemed untouched by the doubts gnawing at me. When we finished, I grabbed whatever clothes were nearest, a baggy sweater and faded jeans that didn't demand much thought. They hung loosely on my frame, a perfect fit for how I felt, detached adrift. Lisa, on the other hand, took her time getting dressed. She rummaged through her closet, humming to herself as though she hadn't a care in the world. "I think I'll wear my model clothes," she announced, pulling out something from the back of the wardrobe. I froze, mid-step. "Model clothes?" I asked, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Yeah," she said, holding up the outfit. "They're more comfortable, and they look better." She slipped into it quickly, turning to face me with an expectant grin. The outfit hugged her body in all the places she knew would catch attention. It wasn't inappropriate, not entirely, but it left little to the imagination. I swallowed hard, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Are you going like that?" She laughed, brushing off my question with a flick of her hand. "Of course. Why not? Don't I look beautiful?" I hesitated, the answer caught in my throat. The way the fabric clung to her hips, the way the neckline dipped just enough. It wasn't just the outfit. It was how she carried herself in it, with a confidence that felt foreign and distant. "You look beautiful," I said finally, my voice flat, resigned. She beamed at me, spinning once as if to give me the full effect. "See? I knew you'd love it." I nodded, though love was far from what I felt. There was a tension between us now, an unspoken weight pressing down on the air. I wanted to say something, to ask her why she was so eager to be noticed by anyone but me. But the words wouldn't come. "Let's go," she said, grabbing her bag with a flourish. I followed her to the door, my feet heavy with reluctance. Whatever this day held, I knew it would demand more of me than I was ready to give. The hum of the engine filled the car, a low rumble that should have been soothing but only grated on my nerves. Lisa was radiant, her smile wide and infectious as she leaned against the passenger door, humming along to a tune on the radio. Her energy seemed boundless, contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside me. She tapped out a rhythm on the dashboard, her excitement palpable. "It's going to be so fun, David. You'll see. It's good for you to relax and have a little fun for once." I grunted in response, my hands tightening around the wheel. Her enthusiasm felt like an accusation, a reminder of everything I wasn't feeling. As we merged onto the highway, I stole a glance at her. She was on her phone, her thumbs dancing across the screen. For a moment, I let it slide. Lisa was always messaging someone, friends, family, anyone who gave her attention. But then a name caught my eye, flashing briefly before she tilted the phone away. Carl. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Carl, my work partner. My heart thudded against my ribs, the sound drowning out the steady rhythm of the tires on the asphalt. I wanted to snatch the phone out of her hand, to demand to know what they were talking about, but I stopped myself. "Don't overreact," I whispered under my breath. It had to be work-related, I reasoned. Carl was reliable, sharp, someone I trusted implicitly. Maybe Lisa had a question about something we'd worked on together, a case or some details she'd overheard from me. There was no need to jump to conclusions. Still, the unease refused to leave. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her smile faintly at whatever Carl had sent back. She typed another message, her fingers moving quickly, and then tucked the phone away into her purse with a satisfied look. "Who was that?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Just a friend," she replied breezily, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. The rest of the drive was a blur of tension and forced silence. Lisa kept the mood light, chatting about the party, the people, the music she hoped to hear. I nodded along, feigning interest while my thoughts swirled in darker waters. When we finally pulled up to the venue, the sight of the cars parked outside managed to break through my haze. Sleek lines, polished chrome, paint jobs that gleamed under the afternoon sun. These weren't just vehicles. They were status symbols, badges of success. I parked next to a stunning McLaren, its bright orange paint job practically glowing, and turned off the engine. Lisa was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her excitement bubbling over. "See, I told you this would be amazing," she said, gesturing toward the house ahead. It was sprawling, modern, the kind of place that screamed exclusivity. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of anticipation. My business partners were here. These were the people I needed to impress, to stay connected with if I wanted to keep climbing the ladder. As I stepped out of the car, the tension from the drive loosened its grip ever so slightly. I smoothed my shirt, glanced at Lisa, still glowing in her model-like attire, and reminded myself why I had agreed to come. Whatever had just happened in the car, whatever doubts lingered in the back of my mind, they could wait. This was my moment to shine. Albert was the first person to greet us, his warm smile cutting through the evening air as he stepped toward us. His handshake was firm, his cologne subtle but sharp, and the way he addressed Lisa with such familiarity sent a ripple of pride through me. "You two made it," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Welcome." The house loomed behind him, a testament to wealth and power, its glass walls reflecting the glow of the setting sun. As we stepped inside, I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer elegance of it all. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the faint hum of jazz in the background. It was like stepping into another world. The people here weren't just acquaintances. They were the titans of my industry, the kind of men and women who could make or break a career with a word. And they all seemed genuinely pleased to see us. "David," a voice called out, and I turned to see a colleague raising his glass in greeting. "Lisa, you look stunning as always," another chimed in, her eyes lingering on my wife with a mix of admiration and envy. Everywhere we went, heads turned to Lisa. Compliments poured in, her beauty and charm shining like a beacon. For a moment, I felt a surge of pride so intense it almost drowned out everything else. This was my wife, my partner. People envied me tonight, and that was a feeling I could live off for weeks. As for me, my oversized clothes didn't raise a single eyebrow. If anything, they seemed to command a quiet respect. I overheard someone murmur, subtle but bold, probably bespoke, and had to suppress a grin. If only they knew the truth, that these were a hasty purchase from a discount rack and nothing more. Lisa and I took to the dance floor at one point, swaying to the rhythm of a slow, soulful tune. She was radiant, her laughter infectious as she leaned into me. It was easy to forget the tension from the car, easy to forget the flicker of Carl's name on her screen. But then, like a shadow at the edge of the light, he appeared. Carl. He was standing near the bar, dressed impeccably as always, his hand wrapped around a glass of something amber and smooth. My heart stuttered for a moment, but it wasn't my reaction that caught me off guard. It was Lisa's. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, her face breaking into a smile so genuine, so warm, that it stirred something uncomfortable in me. "Carl," she called, her voice carrying above the music. He turned, and his expression shifted into one of easy confidence, the kind that always made him stand out in a crowd. As I led Lisa toward him, I tried to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. When we reached him, Carl's eyes didn't settle on me. Not at first. Instead, they lingered on Lisa, his smile growing wider. "I told you I'd be here," he said to her, his tone casual but with an undertone I couldn't quite place. Lisa laughed softly, brushing her hair behind her ear in a way that felt practiced, deliberate. "I didn't doubt you for a second." And just like that, the warmth I'd felt earlier, the pride, the confidence began to dissolve. I forced a smile, extending my hand. "Carl, good to see you." He turned to me then, shaking my hand firmly. "David, always a pleasure." The moment lingered, the air between us thick with something unspoken. Lisa's laughter broke it, light and musical, but for the first time that evening, it didn't fill me with pride. Instead, it felt like a sharp edge, pressing against something fragile inside me. As the three of us stood there, exchanging pleasantries, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that this wasn't just another chance encounter. The conversation with Carl was brief, polite even, but there was an edge to it I couldn't shake. Something about the way he addressed Lisa felt intimate, like they had a rhythm I wasn't privy to. Before I could dwell on it, one of my business partners approached, gesturing for me to join a group gathered near the bar. "David, we've been waiting to talk to you," he said, ushering me away. I turned to Lisa, half expecting her to follow, but she didn't. "I'll catch up with you later," she said lightly. "Carl and I were just about to discuss a few things. Work stuff, you know? Work stuff." I hesitated, the words leaving a sour taste in my mouth, but I let it go. Lisa was charming, social, maybe too much so, but I trusted her. Or at least, I wanted to. The hour that followed passed in a blur of ideas and strategies. I was in my element, debating marketing approaches, discussing forecasts, and soaking up the camaraderie of peers who respected my input. It was the kind of conversation that reminded me why I worked so hard, why I endured long hours and relentless stress. But when the discussion finally wound down, the reality of Lisa's absence hit me. I glanced around the room, expecting to see her laughing with friends or holding court in some corner. She was good at that, drawing people in with her easy smile and quick wit. Instead, she was nowhere in sight. Carl was gone too. I tried to suppress the knot forming in my stomach, telling myself they'd probably stepped outside for some air or joined another group. Lisa had her own rhythm at parties, and I wasn't about to micromanage her night. Still, as the minutes ticked by, and I didn't see her, my unease grew. I started searching, weaving through the crowd as discreetly as I could manage. The house was large, sprawling, with rooms spilling over into more rooms. Each one was filled with laughter, the clink of glasses, and the hum of conversations. But not Lisa. She was here a moment ago, someone said, shrugging. I think I saw her go upstairs, another added. It wasn't until I reached the staircase that I heard the first troubling comment. A man I vaguely recognized, drink in hand, leaned in as I passed. Your wife's a wild one. Huh? He said with a chuckle. What do you mean? I asked, my voice sharp. He gestured lazily toward the second floor. Saw her with Carl. They were heading up. She seemed pretty far gone. Didn't peg her as the type to drink like that. I froze, the words hitting me like a slap. Lisa wasn't a heavy drinker. Not by a long shot. She was always poised, controlled. The idea of her being far gone didn't sit right, but the comment about Carl stung even more. My pulse quickened as I climbed the stairs. Each step weighted with anger and humiliation. The second floor was quiet, the laughter and music below muffled by the distance. I called out for her, my voice cutting through the silence. Lisa! No answer. A couple lingering near a hallway couch pointed upward when I asked if they'd seen her. She went to the third floor, the woman said, her tone hesitant. I think she might need some help. She didn't seem steady. The knot in my stomach tightened, now twisting with shame. I clenched my fists, my jaw tight, as I imagined the spectacle she was making. This wasn't like Lisa, and yet here I was, being pointed upstairs by strangers, my wife the subject of murmured gossip. By the time I reached the third floor, my anger was boiling over. I wasn't just embarrassed. I was furious. Furious at her for putting me in this position, for letting herself lose control in front of people who respected me. And somewhere, buried beneath the anger, was the gnawing fear of what I might find. The third floor was empty, the rooms dimly lit and eerily silent. My footsteps echoed faintly as I searched each room, my voice calling out into the void. Lisa! But she wasn't there. I paused at the end of the hallway, my eyes falling on something I hadn't noticed before, a ladder leading up to the attic. The hatch was slightly ajar, a faint draft rustling the edges of the opening. I stared at it, my gut churning. No, I muttered to myself. There's no way, and yet a part of me couldn't let it go. The whispered comments, the laughter on the lower floors, the way Carl had vanished with her. It all pointed somewhere I didn't want to follow. I gritted my teeth and began climbing, the rickety wooden steps creaking beneath my weight. The attic was silent at first, the still air heavy with dust and the faint smell of old wood. My eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light filtering through a single bulb swinging overhead. Then I heard it, a faint thud, something falling to the floor. My body stiffened, every nerve on edge. I climbed the last few steps and froze. My wife was lying on the floor, her hair tangled, her makeup smeared. She wasn't wearing her dress anymore, just her underwear, the black lace stark against her pale skin. Carl was crouched beside her, his shirtless back to me, his suit discarded in a heap nearby, stained with what looked like spilled wine or worse. For a moment, the scene refused to register, my mind rejecting it as some cruel hallucination. But then Carl turned, his face a mask of surprise and dread. David. Lisa's voice broke through the fog, high-pitched and frantic. David, this isn't what it looks like. She scrambled to her feet, wobbling as she tried to cover herself with trembling hands. What the hell is this? I shouted, my voice raw and trembling as it tore through the attic. Lisa darted toward me, desperation in her eyes. It's not what you think. Please, let me explain. But I couldn't hear her, not over the roaring in my ears, the tidal wave of humiliation and rage crashing over me. Explain? I barked, stepping back as she approached. Explain what, Lisa? That you're half naked in an attic with Carl? That his clothes are lying there like trash? Carl stood, his hands raised as if in surrender. He didn't say a word, and I hated him more for it. Stay back. I yelled at Lisa, my anger boiling over. But she didn't. She bolted past me, darting down the ladder like a woman possessed. Lisa, I shouted, my voice cracking with fury. Get back here. I followed, stumbling as I descended, but by the time my feet hit the third floor, she was already on the second, her bare feet thudding against the hardwood stairs. She burst into the crowded living room, her disheveled state drawing every pair of eyes. Gasps rippled through the room as conversations dropped away, leaving only the stunned silence of disbelief. My colleagues, my partners, stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and disgust. Lisa spun toward me as I reached the bottom step, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. "David, please, Stop!" I snapped, my voice louder than I'd ever heard it. But it wasn't just Lisa's disgrace that made my heart pound. Behind her, Carl stumbled into view, his bare chest glistening with sweat, his trousers barely hanging onto his hips. More gasps, whispers, and then came the laughter. My world tilted, the floor beneath me threatening to give way. My face burned with humiliation, my chest heaving with a mix of anger and shame. I grabbed Lisa's arm, my grip tighter than it should have been. "We're leaving," I hissed through clenched teeth. "No," she cried, trying to pull away. "David, you don't understand." But I didn't care. I yanked her toward the door, ignoring the murmurs and stares, the weight of every judgmental eye following us. When we reached the car, Lisa dug her heels into the ground, refusing to get in. "David, listen to me." I let go, the disgust in my voice barely masked. "Fine. Stay here. Explain yourself to them. Maybe Carl will give you a ride home." Her face crumpled, but I couldn't bear to look at her any longer. I climbed into the car and slammed the door, the engine roaring to life. Without a second glance, I sped away, leaving behind the house, the party, and the woman I thought I knew. As the road stretched ahead, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Lisa's laughter, her joy, her pride in coming here, it had all been a mask. And I, like a fool, had worn mine too, playing the role of the adoring husband until it shattered in front of everyone who mattered. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep driving. The road stretched endlessly before me, blurred by tears I couldn't hold back. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, the bottle of whiskey beside me sloshing with every reckless swerve. Anger coursed through me, hot and unforgiving, but it was the betrayal that stung the most. Carl, my wife, Lisa, the memory of her pleading face and his shameless presence burned into my mind, replaying on an endless loop. How could she? How could they? My chest tightened as I tried to push the thoughts away, but they clawed back with every mile. I gripped the whiskey bottle, taking another long swig. The burn in my throat wasn't enough to numb the pain, but I drank anyway, desperate for any kind of relief. The humiliation from the party weighed on me like a physical burden. My colleagues, no, my partners, had seen it all. Lisa running half-dressed through the crowd. Carl following, shirtless. Me, standing there, exposed and broken. I let out a guttural scream, pounding the steering wheel until my fists ached. The car swerved dangerously, but I didn't care. At this moment, nothing mattered. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the bottle was empty, and the ache in my chest had turned into a full-blown fire. I stumbled out of the car, my vision blurry, but my purpose sharp. Inside, the house was quiet cold. Lisa's heels were by the door, her purse tossed on the counter. Leftovers from a life I couldn't bear to look at anymore. I made my way to the bedroom, grabbing a duffel bag and stuffing it with clothes and essentials. My movements were frantic, driven by rage and adrenaline. Each item I packed felt like a piece of my old life being stripped away, and I welcomed it. Then I saw her laptop. It sat innocuously on the desk, its screen dark, but I knew better. That laptop held her work, her schedules, her emails, everything she valued, everything that gave her a sense of control. Without thinking, I grabbed it and hurled it across the room. The screen shattered with a satisfying crash, the pieces scattering like the shards of my marriage. I wasn't done. I picked it up again, slamming it onto the floor until it was nothing more than a twisted pile of metal and plastic. "Let's see Carl fix this," I muttered bitterly, my voice slurring from the alcohol. I finished packing quickly after that, leaving behind only the things I couldn't bear to touch. Photos, gifts, memories, they all stayed. This wasn't my home anymore. I drove to my office, the place I'd once considered a sanctuary. The silence there was suffocating, but at least it wasn't haunted by Lisa's presence. I dumped my things in the corner, collapsing onto the couch with the remnants of my broken phone in my hands. Messages from my colleagues had been pouring in before the screen cracked. A flood of pity, confusion, and thinly veiled amusement. "David, what happened? Are you okay? Call me." I hurled the phone into the wall, shattering it further. The last thing I needed was their sympathy or their questions. But the office wasn't enough. It felt too close, too connected to everything I wanted to escape. By morning, I was driving again. The city gave way to open fields and narrow roads, the horizon stretching endlessly. I didn't know where I was going, but when I stumbled upon a small, weathered house tucked away in the countryside, I knew I'd found it. It wasn't much, just a bed, a table, and a fridge, but it was enough. It was far from Lisa, far from Carl, far from the prying eyes of my partners. The days bled into each other, each one marked by the clink of bottles and the dull ache of my hangovers. I drank to forget, to drown the memories of Lisa's laughter and Carl's smug face. The money I'd worked so hard to earn was disappearing fast, poured into cheap whiskey and beer. I stopped answering emails, stopped looking at the notifications that popped up on my replacement phone. The man I saw in the mirror wasn't me. Not anymore. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, his stubble a permanent fixture. A month passed like this, every day feeling like a lifetime. I lived in a haze, my thoughts dark and circular. The only clarity I had was the certainty that the life I'd built was gone, shattered like the pieces of Lisa's laptop, still lying on the bedroom floor. And I had no idea how to begin picking it up again.